The global trade landscape is undergoing a seismic shift, and it's happening right under our noses. Donald Trump's aggressive tariff policies, often called the Trump round by his trade representative Jameson Greer, were designed to reassert America's dominance in global commerce. The plan was to leverage the US's massive market power to bend other nations to its will, forcing them to comply with trade terms that favor American interests. But here's the twist: instead of solidifying America's grip on world trade, these policies are pushing countries to rethink their reliance on the US entirely. Over the next 10 minutes, I'll unpack this transformation, revealing how nations are adapting, why China is emerging as a winner, and what this means for the future of global economics. Let's start with the big picture. At the dawn of the century, the US accounted for a fifth of global imports, making it the undisputed heavyweight in world trade. Fast forward to today, and that share has dwindled to just an eighth. Trump's tariffs, think 50% levies on Brazilian coffee or Indian goods, are hitting hard, but they're not forcing countries to bow down. Instead, nations like Brazil, Canada, South Korea, and India are shrugging off the pressure and charting their own paths. They're not just reacting to tariffs, they're rewriting the rules of global trade to reduce their dependence on America. This isn't about defiance, it's about survival and seizing new opportunities in a world where the US isn't the only game in town. Take a look at how countries are responding. Some, like Brazil and Canada, are throwing money at the problem, with Brazil rolling out a $6 billion credit package to cushion its exporters, and Canada pledging nearly $1 billion to prop up its lumber industry. These moves aim to soften the blow of US tariffs, but they come at a cost. Brazil's plan, for instance, spooked investors and strained its already tight public finances. Canada's subsidies risk distorting markets, potentially hiking prices for consumers. Meanwhile, others are doubling down on protectionism. India's Made in India campaign, championed by Prime Minister Narendra Modi, pushes for self-reliance in everything from energy to fighter jets. Canada and Japan are slapping new levies on metal imports, signaling a broader trend toward copycat protectionism. The danger: if everyone starts raising barriers, global costs could spiral, hitting consumers everywhere. But not every response is defensive. Many countries are actively seeking new markets to replace the US. South African farmers, for example, are sending more produce to China and lobbying the EU to ease citrus health rules. Lesotho's garment makers, once tied to American brands like Gap and Levi's, are now eyeing regional buyers and testing demand in Asia. Brazil's coffee exporters, slammed with a 50% US tariff, boosted shipments to North Africa and the Middle East by 3/5 last year. Singapore and South Korea are bankrolling small firms to explore opportunities in South Asia and Mexico. These pivots aren't easy. Replacing the US, which still accounts for 16% of Brazil's coffee exports, takes time and infrastructure. But the trend is clear. Countries are diversifying their trade partners to hedge against America's unpredictability. The most significant shift, though, is in alliances. The BRICS bloc, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, and others, is stepping up in a big way. These countries, targeted by Trump's tariffs, are trading more with each other than with the US. In fact, BRICS members now outpace America in their internal trade, and the gap is growing. Brazil's president, Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, has been working overtime, rallying allies like India's Modi and China's Xi Jinping. Just this month, Lula and Modi discussed digital payments links to reduce reliance on American banks, while Xi called Brazil China relations the best in history. Over a dozen countries, including Thailand and Vietnam, are clamoring to join or partner with BRICS, seeing it as a counterweight to US dominance. Even Canada and Mexico, bound by the USMCA trade pact, are deepening ties to brace for a less reliable America, with plans for joint ventures in energy and AI. Now, here's where it gets interesting. China is emerging as the big winner. While Trump's tariffs aim to weaken adversaries like China, they're having the opposite effect. China's exports to the global south have doubled since 2015, surpassing its sales to the US and Western Europe. In July, even as US exports tanked, China's overall exports grew by 7%. Xi Jinping is seizing the moment, scrapping duties on African imports, and strengthening ties with Latin America and ASEAN nations, whose free trade deal is set to be ratified by year's end. Even India, long wary of China, is warming up, with Modi planning a rare visit to discuss joint projects in electric vehicles and batteries. China's not just filling the gap left by the US, it's building a new trade network that could reshape the global economy. What does this mean for the average person? For one, prices could rise as tariffs and protectionism drive up costs. Think pricier coffee, clothes, or electronics. But it's also a wake up call about the fragility of the old trade order. The US bet on its market power to control global commerce, but that power is waning as countries pivot to new markets and alliances. This shift could stabilize economies in places like Brazil or South Africa by diversifying their trade, potentially creating jobs and opportunities. However, it also risks a fractured global economy where tit for tat tariffs and fragmented alliances make trade less efficient and more costly for everyone. The deeper insight here is about adaptability. Trump's tariffs were meant to put America first, but they're inadvertently accelerating a multipolar world where no single nation calls the shots. Countries aren't just reacting, they're innovating, forming new partnerships, and rethinking their place in the global economy. For consumers, businesses, and investors, this means a future of both challenges and opportunities. Higher prices might sting, but new trade routes and alliances could spark growth in unexpected places. The question is whether this new order will lead to prosperity or chaos, or a bit of both. In closing, Trump's trade policies have lit a fire under the global economy, but not in the way he intended. Instead of bending to America's will, countries are forging their own paths, with China leading the charge. This isn't just a trade war, it's a reordering of global commerce, as nations like Brazil, India, and South Africa pivot to new markets and alliances. They're showing that resilience and adaptability are the real currencies of the future. The world is moving on, and it's up to us to keep up